I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual meeting, and I'd like to explain this meeting format. Tonight we have our commissioners and staff video visible on a video feed. Members of the public have been invited to comment on the Wheatridge Speaks in advance of tonight's meeting and are also able to participate live through a web link or by calling in on the phone. You can find that information on our meeting agenda at www.wheatridgespeaks.org. All members of the public who are participating live have been muted. When it is time for public comment at the start of our meeting or as part of the public hearing, we will unmute all members of the public, and I'll ask you to speak in order based on either by raising your hand or the first letter of your last name, depending on how many members we have tonight. When we unmute the public, please keep background noise to a minimum. You may choose to mute yourself through your own device. If you do not plan to participate at all this evening, we recommend you simply view the meeting live by watching on Channel 8 or on wheatridgespeaks.org. If you do plan to participate this evening when you speak, please first state your name clearly, spell your last name, and give your street address for the record. The time limit for public comment is 3 minutes per person. Speakers may not donate their time. When there are no more speakers, I will close the time for public comment and public participants will be muted again. We appreciate your patience with this virtual format. As with our in-person meetings, our hope is that we create a friendly and respectful atmosphere for public dialogue. We appreciate your help in this process. Thank you. I'd now like to call the City of Wheatridge Planning Commission for October 1st, 2020 to order. Can I get a roll call, members, please?
Ari Kritchiver.
Here.
Jahi Sembai.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Christine Disney.
Here.
Melissa Antle.
Here.
Will Kearns.
Here.
Janet Leo.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Thank you. That is everybody.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
United
of the United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
One
one
nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
with
and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is to approve the order of the agenda for October 1st, 2020. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the order of the agenda.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Call. Okay, time to vote.
Motion passed 8-0.
The next item is the approval of minutes for September 17, 2020. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from September 17th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for a vote. Please raise your hand if you support.
Motion passed 7-1 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. The next item is the public forum. We're at the public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on tonight's agenda. There are 2 cases. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Speakers may not donate their time. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address. We will now unmute all participants. Please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak this time, you may mute yourself through your own device. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
We have 20 people in attendance, so I will go ahead and allow folks to talk. If you would like to speak not on the cases tonight, please use the raise your hand function and I'll call on you. I can view that in the participant window. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Please speak up now before we close the public forum. I will now close the public forum. We have 2 public hearings tonight. For the public hearing, we'll be adding appropriate staff and, when applicable, the applicants to our video feed. Their screens will be shared as presentations are being made. They will remain a part of the video feed until the conclusion of the respective agenda items. After the presentations, the commission will ask and questions of staff and the applicant, and then we will conduct the public comment portion of the hearing. This will be conducted in the same manner as earlier by unmuting our public participants. We typically administer an oath for any participant in a public hearing, staff, applicants, and the public in this virtual meeting format. We are administering that oath in a different way. If you comment during a public hearing tonight, by choosing to testify, you are agreeing that the testimony you give will be the truth as you know it. I will now open up case number WS-20-01, an application filed by Brad Weedman for approval of a 14-lot subdivision in the residential 1 R1 zone district and dedication of a right-of-way for a proposed new public street, and ask for the staff report.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Cutler. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department, and I have 2 videos to present tonight. The first is my staff report, and then I will switch that over to the applicant's presentation. And yeah, let me get that loaded and we can get started. Can you all see the video? Just want to confirm. Okay, I will get that started. Hello, my name is Scott Cutler, and I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. We are here tonight to hear case number WS-2001, which is a request for approval of a 14-lot major subdivision on property zone residential 1. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the subdivision applications, and this digital presentation. The properties within the City of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and therefore the Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case.
Noted.
This is a 2018 aerial photo of the site. Properties outlined in red. It's approximately 6.85 acres, and it consists of a couple of parcels under one ownership. It's located around the property at the hard corner of 32nd Avenue and Kipling Street. Rocky Mountain Ditch is the northern border, and the site is currently vacant, but it was recently used as grazing land. The surrounding area is primarily single-family homes, and Crown Hill Park is to the southeast. The subject site is zoned residential 1, R1, as are all of the properties in the surrounding area. Further north and south in Kipling are more commercial areas, but this area is primarily low-density residential in character. The topography of the site is varied, making development challenging. The site slopes from the south to the north. Each orange contour shown here is 5 feet of elevation change, so portions of the site are up to 40 feet higher than others. The topography and shape of the property affect the ability to develop under a standard zone district, so as you'll see in a minute, the resulting lot shapes and street reflect the conditions on the property. Subdivision regulations are found in Article 4 of the Zoning Code. A subdivision is a reconfiguration of lots, tracts, or parcels for sale or development. A plat is a technical document that removes, creates, or defines property lines, allows the city to evaluate right-of-way, and allows the city to evaluate construction documents. It does not change the zoning, it does not change permitted uses, and it does not look at site design or building placement for individual properties. It enables development already permitted by the current zoning. The purpose of the request is to create legal lots for 14 single-family homes, which will allow the site to develop and lots to be sold. Tracts for the purposes of drainage, easements, and landscaping are also established by the subdivision. A new public street, Hillside Drive, will provide access to most of the lots and connect to 32nd Avenue, aligning with the existing Hillside Drive to the south. The plat also establishes multiple access, utility, and drainage easements. All lots will meet the R1 requirements for at least 12,500 square feet of lot area and 100 feet of lot width. Due to the shape of the property, there are also 2 flag lots, which are only required to be 25 feet wide at the street frontage, expanding to 100 feet wide at the main part of the lot. Cul-de-sac lots are only required to be 30 feet wide and then expand out. The lots will be shown on the next couple of slides. This is an excerpt from page 2 of the plat document, which is Exhibit 3 in the staff report. The main streets are shown, including the new Hillside Drive, which will provide access to lots 3 through 14. The Rocky Mountain Ditch is on the north side of the site. The 3 tracks are shown in gray. The next slides will show some more detail, so we'll move along. This is the eastern portion of the plat, with major easements and tracks annotated. 2 tracks are shown in green, which will function as open space, and Tract A at the northeast corner also contains an underground water detention facility. A pedestrian easement, shown in light blue, will allow a sidewalk to connect from the Hillside Drive cul-de-sac to a new sidewalk on Kipling Street being built as part of this development. Tract B, shown in gray, will provide access to an existing home on the adjacent property. A driveway currently exists in this location, and access to that property is not being changed, just preserved under Tract B in an easement. This is the western portion of the plat. You can see the continuance of Hillside Drive to intersect with 32nd Avenue at the south. A large sanitation easement is along 32nd Avenue for the purposes of serving lots 1 and 2. Lots 1 and 2 in the southwest corner will gain access from 32nd Avenue, a condition which was approved by the engineering division. The Rocky Mountain Ditch, which I've said runs along the north side of the property, will be placed in a separate easement, allowing the ditch company access for maintenance. This is reflective of existing conditions on the north and south sides of the ditch. Since Wheatridge is not a full-service city, we sent the application on referral to outside agencies, including fire, water, and sanitation, as well as completed an internal review. There are no remaining comments on this application, and both the Planning Division and Engineering Division have found the plat to be approvable. Construction documents, including paving, drainage, and grading plans, are under review by the Engineering Division, and a landscaping and streetscape plan are under review by the Planning Division, but are not part of this presentation nor decision. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days, and letters were sent to property owners within a 600-foot radius. Comments collected on the Wheatridge Speaks website will be reviewed by the Planning Commission and entered into the public record. Ultimately, staff has concluded the request meets the subdivision regulations and all agencies can serve the property. It will allow the development of the site as permitted by the R1 zone district to proceed. For all of those reasons, staff recommends approval of the request. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will note that we did receive 7 public comments on the Wheatridge Speaks website. So commissioners, if you have questions about any of those comments, feel free to ask those after I play the applicant's presentation. Give me just a minute to get that loaded. All right.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brad. I'm with Workshop Colorado. I'm here to present a major subdivision called Hilltop Estates. Hilltop Estates is a subdivision of a tract of land located in the northeast quarter of Section 28, or more commonly known as the northwest corner of 32nd and Kipling. Hilltop Estates is roughly a 6.8 acre parcel. It is currently zoned R1 and is vacant. Our current proposal is to subdivide into 14 single-family custom home sites. Each of these custom home sites will conform and meet all of the minimum requirements of the R1 zoning set forth by Wheat Ridge. As part of our project, we plan on completing several public improvements. Some of these improvements consist of improvements along Rocky Mountain Ditch, improvements along Kipling Street, and improvements along 32nd Avenue. The entrance to our subdivision will be off of 32nd Avenue, directly across from Hillside Drive. We plan on subdividing and building 14 single-family custom homes here. Workshop Colorado is a full-scale design-build firm located and native to Colorado. Workshop Colorado has completed well over 200 homes in the single-family market. Some of our recent projects in Wheat Ridge consist of Mirkwood Estates at 32nd and Robb Street, Quail Creek Estates at 32nd and Quail. Our vision for Hilltop Estates is that the design and construction is timeless and permanent. Our architecture style will lend itself to a mid-century style in form, volume, and massing with a fun workshop influence. Please take a minute to review the plat that we are proposing for a 14-lot single-family subdivision that conforms to the R1 zoning, which is already in place for this property. Thank you for taking the time to understand our project. We look forward to better assisting you with any questions that you may have in the future. Thanks again.
And that concludes my presentation and the applicant's presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's hear from the commissioners. Commissioner Disney, do you have any questions?
I do, of the developer. Is this the right time to ask that question?
I think
Loaded,
you can, either way.
Pardon? Okay.
I promoted the applicant team, so they'd be able to answer as well.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious. It seems that lot 10 is kind of an oddly shaped lot. And it might kind of, I'm not sure how you would fit a house on that. I'm not very good at size and dimension, but it seems like a very odd shaped lot. It was my only concern. I think the rest of it looks great. Do you have any?
Yeah, so, hi, my name is Nathan Loddick. I'm a civil engineer for the development, part of the development team. You're right, lot 10 has a weird shaped lot. It is, I think, over 30,000 square feet. But what we intend to do is the driveway entrance will come off the cul-de-sac bulb, and it'll be a rather large driveway that kind of skirts the property line along lot 11, and the house will actually sit closer to Kipling. The rest of that parcel is rather steep. You know, we're improving it, and we're limited to maximum grades of 4:1 in that area. So it'd be kind of hard to sit a house over on the skinnier part that kind of follows Hillside Drive, but where it kind of widens out a little bit closer to Kipling is where the home site's intended to be. And the planning department actually made us provide a concept floor plan and footprint for that lot and lot 14, if I'm remembering correctly. I need to pull it up on my computer, but just to make sure that we could provide a feasible home on those lots. So that's kind of the explanation of that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Commissioner
Yeah,
Disney?
I have a question.
Just hold on, please.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Leo.
What are the anticipated costs of the homes?
That'll depend on a lot of different factors. A lot of the home sites are intended to be custom home sites, so somebody can approach Workshop Denver and kind of design a house that could, really have any sort of range depending on the square footage of the home and the level of finish that they would like in it. But we kind of anticipate the homes being anywhere from 800,000 to even over $1 million, depending on the lot that they are on and the view that they may have of the mountains. The property does really afford very good views out to the west. So we anticipate people wanting to build some higher end custom homes on these lots.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sambai, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is for Scott. Just a question on the history of I guess I would say the 10,001 West 32nd Avenue. In the notes, it said it was previously contained in institutional use. I mean, I drive by that all the time. Is that area uninhabited right now?
I'm going to actually pitch that one to Lauren. I'm not very familiar with the history in that property.
Okay, sure.
So the property historically was a group home for adolescents, and it had a special use permit issued every year for a series of years. I want to say it was there for at least 15. It has, they vacated the premises maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and it has been largely vacant since then. Several developers have approached that corner property to try to make this one sort of cohesive triangle, and that just didn't come to fruition. That corner property has explored a few different potential uses, but is not actively under any sort of development proposal or use.
I got it. Okay. The next question I have kind of deals with Tract B, and maybe the developer. It said there's not going to be much change there. There's a current house and people live there, I assume. I wanted to understand that, how that is in this plat, and I didn't hear anything from that owner, so I just wanted a little more information on that track. How is it being developed, if at all?
Right. So that was just part of the property that was acquired. There's an existing easement that has been in place over that tract for many, many years. I don't know how many years, probably 20, 30 years, that serves the house kind of in that diamond-shaped kind of outlot. The person who lives in that house is related to the owners of the bigger property on the corner. And so we went through a bunch of different iterations on what to do with that area with the city before kind of landing on this. And it was decided it would be easiest and best if it was just put into a tract that kind of mirrors the easement as it is today. And that will, it's basically overlaying their driveway that serves their property. And so no improvements will be made there because it's just their driveway and it's their responsibility to maintain their access to their own property anyway. And there are discussions that we've had with them of potentially taking ownership of Tract B so that it is just part of their property, but we haven't kind of come to any firm conclusions on doing that at this point in time yet.
Okay, thank you.
But they are in support of the project, by the way, if anybody's interested to know that.
That's good to know. I'll ask one more question currently, and this is within the public improvements, which is on page 4 of the document, or maybe page 11 if everybody's looking at it in the PDF. And it deals with the 6-foot detached sidewalk. So it's about, I guess it's the third paragraph down, and I'll just read it. A 6-foot detached sidewalk and a 6-foot landscape amenity zone will be constructed on the Kipling Street frontage, including street trees and so forth. This detached walk will tie into a new 5.5-foot attached sidewalk along the 1,000. I'll just, you all can read that along with me. The address there, which will turn and tie into the curb ramps at the corner of 32nd and Kipling. The developer is constructing this 5.5-foot attached portion along that property so that there is not a sidewalk gap So it says kind of at the beginning of that paragraph, 6-foot detached sidewalk is going to be constructed, but that then later it says a 5.5 foot sidewalk is going to be constructed. So I just got confused. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the portion of the project, or I guess the portion of the sidewalk along the project that we're looking at tonight would be the 6-foot detached sidewalk with the 6-foot landscape zone.
Okay.
Reason why it's being required to build that 5.5 foot portion is so that there's not a gap between a new sidewalk and the intersection of 32nd and Kipling, but it's not the property being associated tonight. So it's not, we can't really assess and require right of way from another property owner that's not involved in this project to build the full section. So the 5.5 foot attached sidewalk is built within existing right of way and will still allow for a sidewalk connection to be done, but not overly intrude upon an adjacent property owner's property at this point.
I can share an aerial too, if that might help illustrate it quickly. Commissioner Stimbai, would that help?
Yeah, that would be great. Because I'm still confused about, wouldn't there be a gap if we have a 6 and a 5.5?
So if you can see, this is the subject property, so that's where it will be 6. This is not the subject property, but I believe Scott, is this what you're referring to, where we'll have what we can fit in that area is 5.5 feet.
Yeah, it's the Kipling frontage, but same concept.
Sorry.
Yeah, so 5.5 along the 10,001 property, and then 6.5 along the remainder of the property, or 6 feet along the property that's the subdivision application is for.
So there's no sidewalk in this segment here adjacent to property that's not part of this project, but we're not going to leave that gap. So we'll fit what we can in our right of way.
Okay, I see. Okay, that's helpful. I will stop with the questions there. I might have some more later, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Oh, that was good information. Commissioner Antal?
Yeah, just a couple more logistical questions. How far is the spacing of the new Hillside Drive from the intersection at Kipling and 32nd?
And we might be trying to measure it.
Thank you. My eyeballs, I'm measuring it on our map right now. 500 feet to the center line approximately, maybe a little bit more.
And so, I mean, I understand Hillside Drive on the other side is parallel to that, but in terms of current standards for access points, distance from intersection, is that in compliance with kind of your current standard, like your desired standard for access from an intersection?
Our civil engineer, Jordan Jeffries, is on, so if you are available to answer, you're welcome to. In Wheat Ridge, 1 block is about 300 feet and 2 blocks is about 600 feet. So at about 500, it's meeting our requirements. What was most critical in this case is that they align, so we don't have any conflicting left turning movements.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And can you remind me, like, what is the max height in the R1 zone?
It's 35 feet.
35 feet. Okay, so with all those homes,
citywide, not just this property.
Okay, sorry, that's me not doing my homework. All right, and then secondly, I know there have been a lot of drainage concerns there, and it sounds like everyone on staff has kind of signed off on the drainage improvements, because certainly with the neighborhood below and the grade being what grade is, there have been a lot of concerns from the neighborhood below on kind of any type of development happening on that site. So I don't know if there have been kind of some just public meetings just to engage that neighborhood and the design of that, but maybe if you could speak a little to that piece.
Not particularly on the actual design of the drainage. I will say a couple things and then maybe let Jordan chime in, because the civil documents are still under review. I think we're getting pretty close, but they're not approved yet. So one major factor is that this project is not allowed to drain into the Rocky Mountain Ditch. That's actually private water that's owned by the Rocky Mountain Ditch Company. So there won't be any sort of flow into there. Everything's kind of got to go into its own system. And then I believe it's tract A at the northeast corner. That's where all the water is going to end up. So this site is basically meant to capture everything and then put it into its own drainage system. So nothing's going in the creek and the ditch, and nothing is going across the ditch to the north. It's all going to be piped in its own system. Hopefully, Nathan or Jordan, that's mostly correct.
And has there been, go ahead.
Sorry,
Nathan.
go. I was just going to add on to that. He is correct. So basically, we have a drainage system that extends pretty much all the way from Kipling over to lots 1 and 2 that kind of parallels the Rocky Mountain Ditch. And we have inlets spaced where needed to, basically capture all the flow that's coming down that hill. Will be routed into 2% grass swales that are then picked up by inlets. And then it's routed all the way over to tract A by Kipling. And then from there it's discharged into an existing storm sewer system in Kipling. So not only did the city review that design, but Rocky Mountain Ditch also had to sign off it, and they had their own engineers look into it because they're not allowed to accept any stormwater runoff at all. So they also reviewed it and said, or were okay with the design as proposed. And I know there are, I heard some neighbors to the north saying they have issues with some groundwater concerns and things like that. And that may be because they're downhill from the Rocky Mountain Ditch. And a lot of times across the metro area, downhill properties from these ditches see a lot of water surcharge into the soil. But since we are all uphill from that, it's not really a concern from our property, and our geotechnical investigations haven't really shown any shallow groundwater anywhere on the site. So.
Well, and just for educational purposes, I guess for all of us, I mean, it sounds like there has to be a distinction between what might your property contribute to any concerns about drainage and flooding versus what is part of the Rocky Mountain ditch's responsibility. Or could you explain that a little better? Because, certainly there's a perception once you on a property, there's a level of responsibility to kind of take care of what you generate versus what is happening because of the Rocky Mountain Ditch itself, right?
Right. So, I mean, historically, this whole property...
I guess I'm curious how you guys handle that.
Right. Yeah, so historically, all of our discharge would have just went downhill and it would have went into the Rocky Mountain Ditch, where it was either, conveyed out to the east, or maybe in a huge event, maybe it was overtopping and going somewhere else. I'm not quite sure. But, as part of the regulatory requirements that we have to meet, we actually have to capture all of our water and release it from the site at a 10% decreased rate of what is existing.
Okay.
So we're actually capturing and detaining and releasing it at a lower release rate than what would have just naturally shed off this land historically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Commissioner Larson?
Thank you, Commissioner Earl. Request for Scott. Would you mind putting that contour diagram back up from the beginning with the orange line showing the contours?
I will try. I need to find that frame in the video to get it. Give me just a second.
Yeah, because I mean, you drive by that site and it is fairly steep from one end to the other, and I need to, I think, visually get a better sense for how that steep cutoff can be managed appropriately for 14 houses. So most of the drop off is closer to the existing house. Is that correct?
Yes. So a lot of the drop off, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it is kind of right behind the existing house complex right at the corner. And then there's also some topo along the Rocky Mountain Ditch. So the site is definitely steeper along the Kipling side, and then a little bit more flat. I mean, obviously it is still downhill from 32nd down to the ditch, but it's less steep than it is on the east corner.
And even though it isn't quite as steep as you go further to the north, it still seems significant. And I guess the question is, if your engineers are satisfied that that it can be managed, that the runoff can be managed.
I'll let Jordan Jeffries respond to that because he's been the one that's been reviewing grading and drainage. And I'm going to stop sharing just because I don't know what you guys. Jordan, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute everything. Hi, I'm Jordan Jeffries. I'm with the engineering department. Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue. There are going to be swales between individual lots. And like Nathan was mentioning, there's a storm sewer system that parallels the ditch with 4 or 5 inlets. So everything should be directed into that storm sewer system, which is routed into the underground detention basin and then into the existing CDOT storm sewer system along Kipling, where it'll flow north. And CDOT has taken a look at that, and apparently that system has capacity. So we don't really foresee any issues with the drainage on the site. As far as the issues on the north side of the ditch, I think as Nathan had kind of mentioned, those are likely due to the groundwater issues and the ditch flow. I don't think this site will have any impact on issues north of the ditch because also, as was mentioned, the flow now, the runoff, any excess runoff that doesn't infiltrate is actually flowing into that ditch. And after the development, the runoff will all be captured and will not be able to get into the ditch, and it will be rerouted into the storm sewer system. So if anything, it would provide an almost negligible improvement, but it'll be negligible. I don't think it's anything anybody will notice. It's not going to solve their issue, but it's certainly not going to make it worse.
And Jordan, if I could follow up on that, your examination of the drawings indicates that you can fit, 3 lots along Kipling, even though the contours are still, again, fairly steep. Each one of those lots will have to be graded, right? And what, you'd have one sort of above the one next to it, or how would that work?
Yeah, so these probably aren't going to be your traditional homes. I think a lot of them will be split level. This is just my guess. Nathan could probably shed some light on that, but you're going to have possibly walkout basements or split level homes. So I think there will be some different home designs that they incorporate on the site, but it is certainly something that is doable.
If I could just add a couple more comments because it is sometimes hard to visualize what this will look like. So just for point of reference, the pipe that's capturing these flows before it gets to the ditch ranges in size from 18 inches up to 36 inches as it gets closer to Kipling. So it's a sizable pipe to ensure that we're capturing all that runoff. And the topography that you're seeing on this site, which looks steep because it's never been regraded for development, it's following the grade of Kipling as it goes down that hill. You're all familiar with that hill. The neighborhood on the other side of Kipling that is already developed has that same topography. So we don't notice it as much because the ground has been graded to make building footprints for those homes that are there. But the grade on this site is really not too much different than the neighborhood that's existing just on the other side of Kipling, on the east side.
And just one last question. Whose responsibility for maintaining that drainage system? Is it the HOA?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Commissioner Kearns, any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of questions. Lot 12 is on Kipling Street, and I don't see how it's going to be accessed. Is the access to it from Kipling, or is it from the cul-de-sac? Looks like there's a maintenance easement in there. Does the access share that maintenance easement?
Yeah, so that would be considered a cul-de-sac lot. It does actually get access from the cul-de-sac. It's just like a lot of cul-de-sac lots, it's a little bit more wedge shaped. So it's pretty narrow. It would just be a driveway and then expand out. And you can have a driveway across a sanitation easement and a maintenance easement because it's just concrete. It's not a structure.
Okay. And then let's see. Jahi mentioned the tract B. I was curious about that. Thanks for answering that. And then a couple of kudos. The pedestrian access easement you have between the end of the cul-de-sac and Kipling Street. That's really great. Thank you, Nathan. That's really promoting walkability through the neighborhood and bikeability. So that's really cool. It's also really cool to see the 8-foot sidewalk, 8-foot sidewalks I think you have. I don't know if Wheat Ridge requires an 8-foot sidewalk, but
we'll have a 5-foot sidewalk. You may be looking at the 8-foot dimension. That's the utility easement that goes along the frontages of those lots.
Okay, so it's a 5-foot sidewalk, but an 8-foot setback or
8-foot easement for gas, electric, whatever they put in there.
Okay, well this is just really great for pedestrians and bicyclists that don't want to go all the way up to Kipling and 32nd and can kind of go around. So that's really great. Thank you for that. I'm really excited to see this neighborhood. This is going to be a really nice neighborhood, and I think it's going to be really unique in terms of how you guys are fitting the houses into the site and the types of houses themselves that are going to have to be built to fit into some of these lots. So really interested and excited to see this. Thanks. That's it for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And just real quick to add on to what was Jordan was saying earlier about Mr. Larson's question, these houses will be pretty unique. Each lot has a different scenario with different types of topography. So, I mean, you might even have some houses that have kind of tucked under garages in the front, where your living would maybe be up in the second level. Some houses will be walkout basements, like was mentioned before. So it will be a unique neighborhood, and you won't see the same house repeated throughout there. I'm pretty confident that everyone will be unique and different. So we're excited about it as well.
Commissioner Christopher.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had 2 questions, and both of these questions may actually be more appropriate for when we have an opportunity to review the site development plan. So I may be getting ahead of myself, but I'm still the new guy, so I'm still trying to figure it all out. And both of these questions actually relate also to some of the public comments that were made. So the first question is about what type of plan there is to retain or not retain any of the existing sort of vegetation, trees, and things of that nature that are currently on that property.
So where we can, because of the topography of the site that's been brought up multiple times, there will be a lot of grading going on the site. Where we can, we like to preserve trees because they're a great addition, or not addition, they're obviously existing, but they're great to keep in the neighborhood. But there are certain areas where trees will have to go. One of the places where we're being required to remove some of the trees is on the existing Rocky Mountain ditch easement. They're making us improve their bank. Their bank on the south side is very steep and eroded in a lot of places. And just like the city, when we make applications, you guys make us do improvements to our your frontages. So we're making improvements on 32nd and Kipling. The ditch company is kind of the same way. They're making us do improvements along that whole ditch line and laying it out at a more shallow slope so that they don't see erosion and stuff in there. So there will be some trees that we do have to take out in that area, but again, we'll save every tree that we can.
And then is that something that we'll be able to sort of see more fully with the site development plan? Am I correct about that?
So we're not, Scott can chime in here, but we're not required to do a site development plan for this project because it's a use by right where it's R1 zoning. We're just, again, doing use by right. So I think this is kind of the process where you're seeing some of that hashed out. Scott, is there anything you want to add there?
That's exactly right. And I've got some fire trucks in the background, so hopefully it's not too loud. Yeah, so for this, it's a subdivision application. The next thing that the city will be reviewing is actually building permits for each individual lot. But currently, engineering and planning are also reviewing the civil construction documents. So that's the much more detailed grading plan with all the retaining walls and where the streets and utilities go in. There is a landscape component to that plan. Those are only for the individual tracts. So like tract A and tract C, there is some landscaping going in that we're reviewing and would be required to meet city landscaping requirements. But for each individual lot, it's just like anyone else's property. The city, there's a minimum requirement for street trees. I think it's 1 per 70 feet, but otherwise it's up to the individual property owner to decide how they want to landscape their yards.
Thank you for that. And then my second question is there any plan? I think one of the public comments brought up the prospect of some type of noise reduction, some type of effort at noise reduction from traffic on both 32nd and Kipling. Is there anything being incorporated in this project to address that concern?
That's not a requirement of the city. I know that they are proposing a fence along the Kipling frontage. And then if any individual property owner wished to, add landscaping along there, that would be on them. But right now we're just seeing fences being proposed, similar to the existing conditions all along Kipling and 32nd.
Thank you.
And it is being proposed on an individual lot basis that we kind of do a line of trees along Kipling within those individual lots to kind of help buffer some of that sound coming off of Kipling. And hopefully, that reduction in noise would carry through to the other people that have noise concerns as well.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's all. Thanks.
I have a couple questions. And this is for staff. Do you know if you could look at that, let's see, the plan view sheet 2 of 2 that shows the lots. My question is looking at that sheet, do the adjacent Overlook Estate lots exclude the 30-foot ditch easement for their lot?
So the Overlook Estates subdivision was platted in the 1950s, and on that plat, it shows the Rocky Mountain Ditch as the center line for those properties. So the Rocky Mountain Ditch kind of has the discretion to ask for easements, and in the Hilltop Estates subdivision, they're requesting that 30-foot easement. I think historically that's probably been closer to like 15 or 20 feet. So I believe it is shown on the Overlook Estates plat. It's just not shown here, but there is a Rocky Mountain Ditch easement on the other side to answer your question briefly.
So the property line on that Overlook Estates, that is, you're saying that it's in this generally in the center line of the ditch. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Because that's what I was going to ask is is that typical to include? It's a pretty big easement, a 30-foot easement in the lot size. Is there somewhere else in Wheat Ridge where that exists, that 30 feet? Because this runs all throughout Wheat Ridge.
They have the discretion to ask for various widths. I've seen 15, I've seen 20, I've seen 30. And then in some areas where it kind of predates the ditch, there are no easements. And then if there's ever work, they'll try to go in and request it. So it's pretty haphazard. But I think their standard now, they would like to get as much as they can.
And then do you know, so you mentioned that for the ditch easement, they want to be able to access that 30 feet. I would understand going through each lot. So would I be correct in assuming that your fence line could not go perpendicular to the property line, because you would then you would bar any access, correct?
I can share maybe the aerial. It illustrates it a little bit on the north side. So you can see that. So the brown lines here roughly represent property lines. They're not exact, but you can see, for example, for these existing lots, their fences are set already quite a bit further away from the center line of the ditch. So it'd be a similar situation on these properties where they were going to have a privacy fence. It would have to be outside of that easement. In the same way that, like, for example, 101.6, their property line goes to the ditch, but their fence is along that prescriptive easement. Does that illustrate it a little bit better?
I think so. So generally, if there was a fence installed for these lots, it would have to be outside of that 30 feet easement, correct?
Typically, yep.
Okay. And then I did walk the site today, and I noticed that generally there are a lot of large cottonwood trees near the ditch. Are cottonwood trees allowed to be planted in the city, or is that a prohibited tree?
Those are prohibited now.
Okay. Who would be, I guess, if they decided to keep, if the developers decided to keep some of these large cottonwood trees, which are sometimes problematic because of the weak wood and stuff, who would be responsible for the maintenance of that? If they're in the 30-foot easement, would that be the ditch company that was responsible for the easement, or is that the property owner?
So I can just chime in real quick on that specific point. The cottonwood trees were one trees in specific that they wanted to make sure were removed because of the first point they told me was they can consume up to 1,000 gallons of water a day, which takes away from their prescriptive amount of water that they have moving through their ditches. And when they do die or get pushed over in a windstorm or something, they can cause erosion of the banks of their ditch. So they specifically wanted all the cottonwood trees to go.
Okay, thank you. And then one question is, I think I've seen some seasonally wet areas on this property. I guess you could say it's, kind of like wetlands, but are there any wetlands on this site as defined by the Clean Water Act Section 4.4 permit program?
There's no federally regulated wetlands on the property.
Okay. That is all that's all the questions I have. Do any other commissioners have any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Simbai.
I just had another question to get about accessing lot 1 and 2. In the notes, it says it's going to be accessed from 32nd Avenue. How are they accessing? Is it going to be two? I mean, could you explain that a little bit? Maybe you, Scott, or Nathan?
There would just be direct driveway connections to the street from those lots because they directly border 32nd Avenue. And we don't know the exact layout at this point. I think it would be determined more at time of building permit when they figure out like where the house is actually going to be sited on the lot. Then they'll have a better idea of where the driveway is going to go.
Are there any other questions from the commissioners for the applicant or staff before I open up the public hearing comment? Yes, Commissioner Kearns.
One quick one. I noticed the change in right of way. There looks to be a 5-foot change on the Kipling side. Why is that? And is it possible to correct that as part of this process? Do you see how the right of way jogs? It goes from a 10-foot, let's see, 20-foot right of way to a 15-foot right of way.
It's on the northeast corner of lot 10.
Yeah, and is that the reason for the difference in the sidewalk widths?
No, so that's an existing condition. We can fit the walks on the west side of Kipling with the right of way that we have. So that does not indicate like the edge of asphalt or the curb line.
Okay.
So we've designed the public improvements to fit in the existing right of way, and neither the city nor CDOT need additional right-of-way width, and that's why there's not, usually why there's not getting any more right-of-way to make that a straight line.
Okay, so if the developer is building a fence along this line, does that mean there has to be a jog in the fence?
There may be. It doesn't have to be that way, but there could be.
Thanks, that's all I had.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant before I open up the public hearing? Okay, I will now open up the hearing for public comment. If you wish to comment on this case, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Speakers may not donate their time to another speaker. When I recognize you, please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address. We will now unmute all participants. Please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak at this time, you may mute yourself through your own device. There's a large number of participants. Is there anyone wishing to speak whose last name begins with A through E?
It'll take me just a moment to unmute everybody. And what I'll do, if you're raising your hand, I'll go ahead and call on you first, and then we'll do the alphabet if that's okay, just for
That's fine. Yep.
The first person with their hand raised was Scott Abel, I believe. You should be able to speak now.
Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Abel. My address is 10270 on West 33rd Avenue. Questions I do have. My property, from looking south, the elevation is probably 20 to 30 feet high. Concerns that I have is once they go to grade, what is the developer going to do? One, to shore up the ditch line to assure we have tremendous amount of erosion as it is right now. The second is what type of privacy, or is the developer planning to do any type of privacy along the southern edge of the Rocky Mountain Ditch? That's all I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you explain maybe for our listening audience that will answer all the questions?
Yes. Yes, we will, for efficiency's sake of time, we're going to have everybody and go through everybody that wants to speak and speak. They can ask their questions. I'm going to take some notes. And then after we get through all the citizens, then I will go ahead and ask staff and applicant to answer some of these questions. Thank you.
Thanks. The next person that had their hand raised was Michelle Cotton. You should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I live at 10310 West 33rd. My last name is Cotton. Some of the concerns I have.
Sorry, can you repeat your address, please?
10310 West 33rd.
Thank you.
I'm going to stand up. My speaker is up high. So I'm concerned about a couple of things. One, I wanted some clarification on the sidewalks going on the corner of 32nd and Kipling. It seems I read something that with the retaining wall, they were not going to be expanded in that section. So I'm a little confused on where the sidewalks are going to be and where they're going to not be. And then it is so tight in that spot. If we are putting in sidewalks, I feel like if the owners are of that property are so pleased with this subdivision that they would be willing to add a half a foot to make that 6 feet along Kipling flow properly. And also just that retaining wall, it seems we could do something there because it's a really dangerous intersection. We're going to have 14 homes with children walking to schools on the other side at some point. So that's a concern of mine. The other thing I'm concerned of, I am a shareholder in Rocky Mountain Ditch. We have water rights at our property. So what that access is going to look like, if they're grading to, if it's going to be flattened there, what that's going to look like, what the mitigation is with the trees coming out, we have a lot of cottonwoods, and that's really all the privacy we get right now. So that's a little concerning. I will be taking it up with the ditch company as well. And I'm not a planner, but it seems like the property square footage is based on a property line that goes across the ditch. And I don't know planning or surveying or anything, but it seems like the square footage of the lot is reflective of that easement that can't be built on. So I was kind of wondering about that too. And that's it. Nervous public speaking.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand raised is Sirma. You should be able to speak now.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Sierra Quinones. I am at 10270 West 33rd Avenue. And I do appreciate Scott and Michelle's comments because they addressed some of the questions that I had. But I really am concerned about the regrading of the property. So if that could be addressed in the next, I don't know if by the end of this meeting or in the next meeting, it would be ideal because the regrading of the property, how that decision is made, is going to be affecting the erosion on the hill going into the ditch. So I'm definitely concerned about that. And I would like to know.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else with their hand raised, so if you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. I believe it's *9 if you're on the phone, or it should be an icon if you're on your desktop or your mobile device. Here we go. Stan, you should be able to speak now. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Stan Koniz, K-O-N-I-Z. I live at 10100 West 33rd Avenue. I submitted a number of comments on the Wheat Ridge Speaks page, but one dawned on me yesterday as I walked along the site and looked at it. There's like a 12-foot drop from where Hillside Drive is supposed to come in. And then I got looking at the pond that needs to be filled in. And, I'm not a civil engineer. I don't play one on TV, but I just got thinking about it, and I'm pretty good at estimating things. And, when I looked at the size of what needs to be filled and the depth that it needs to be filled and the compaction ratio, I came up with like 2,000 truckloads of dirt that needs to be hauled in there. And I would like that addressed, please.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, you have my other ones.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next hand that we have is Melody. You should be able to speak now. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good evening, City of Wheat Ridge Planning Commission. I'm Melody Mascarenas. I live at 62 Hillside Drive, Wheat Ridge, Colorado. My family has lived in the established...
Can you please spell your last name?
Sure. Yes, I get that a lot. Mascarenaz.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We've lived in Paramount Heights for almost 20 years, across the street from the planned subdivision. As has been discussed, the development property is unique. It lies on the heavily used and crowded Kipling and 32nd Streets. Yet it has a beautiful landscape and the large trees and the views of the Rocky Mountains. Some of the issues I'd like to address is traffic. As been mentioned previously, before the Planning Commission or at previous meetings, the concern over high traffic in that area. There are impacts on already busy and dangerous 32nd and Kipling Streets. Currently on a regular basis, traffic backs up on 32nd headed eastbound, and I have to wait to turn into my garage. The intersection can have backups on a daily basis during COVID and non-COVID times. And I believe to minimize the interruption to the flow of traffic going westbound and to not impede the bike riders going down the hill, because 32nd is a high bike area. At a high rate of speed, these bikes are going down the street. The planned subdivision should have a decelerating turn lane going north into the development. even though the other developments on 32nd that this developer's built have a similar number of homes, I believe the grade of the hill here is different from the others and should be located, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here for a minute. Please consider this in your review, that this decelerating turn lane into the development, since 32nd is a well-known bike path. Also, parking during the construction. Parking of the construction crews on hillside or adjacent streets. I spoke with homeowners who currently live on Quail Street and was informed that the construction crews block driveways with their work vehicles, etc. I would like a guarantee from the developer that my driveway that faces 32nd and also my neighbors' driveways on hillside and the surrounding neighborhoods will not be blocked and our streets not impacted by this development. With these difficult times with COVID, it is also possible for my neighbors that could not attend tonight, this evening, that they could be given time to write in or email their comments to the city and also city plan.
30 seconds left.
Because lastly, I'd like to find out about the terracing that's going to occur on the site. And I was told by the city planner that they would not bring in fill dirt, so I'd like to find out more information. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
The next person with their hand raised is Steve. Steve, you're able to talk if you can unmute yourself. Steve, if you can hear us, I've enabled you to speak if you can unmute yourself. I see that your hand is raised.
Should be in the bottom left.
With their hand raised is Steve. There we go. You're able to talk if you can unmute yourself.
Unmute. Hi, this is actually Annetta Storvik. Steve and I have lived here on 50. Could you hear me?
We're getting some background. Do you have your speaker on?
I have my headphones in.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, this is Annetta Storvik, A-N-E-T-A, Storvik, S-T-O-R-V-I-K. Me and my husband live on 59 Hillside Drive, and we lived here for about 5 years. And I guess I'd just like to reiterate the concern. We have we have 3 children, small children. We have a wraparound driveway, and we already get so many turnarounds in our driveway. One car almost hit our kid, and this has nothing to do with the development here, but that is a concern that more homes on that side could increase traffic. And like Melody mentioned, like we can barely get out of our house during rush hour, and it gets backed up so easily. If there's any like traffic on I-70, like this road just gets highly impacted. And I think if there's any like tracking of traffic right now during COVID, it's not an accurate representation at all. And also this is just a personal concern, but part of the beauty of living in this city is the landscape, and living in Paramount is landscape and the impeccable views. And we're concerned because we live right off of the properties that you guys are developing. And for us, it's our personal concern that our view is going to turn into just staring into people's homes. So we would just be interested in like knowing the height of these developments and the homes, and and how it will impact our view as well, because that is something that does concern us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if anybody would like to speak, you're welcome to raise your hand. If we don't get anybody else with a hand.
Our view is going to turn into just staring into people's homes. So
There we go. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Stan, I see that your hand is raised, but believe that you got a chance to speak a moment ago. Let's go ahead and maybe open it up to the alphabet roll call, and I'll enable everyone. If it gets to your last name in the alphabet, you'll be welcome to unmute yourself.
Okay. Is there anyone wishing to speak whose last name begins with A through E? A through E. Last name A through E. Okay, is there anyone whose last name begins with F through J? Last name begins with F through J. Is there anyone wishing to speak whose last name begins with K through O? K through O? Did we have somebody? Is there anybody whose last name begins with P through T? P through T? Is there anybody whose last name begins with U through Z? U through Z that wishes to speak? Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this case? Please speak now before I close the citizens forum.
I have a hand raised from someone who spoke previously. I'm gonna unmute them just in case they have a second person in their household.
Okay.
Stan, I can see that your hand is raised. I've enabled you to speak as well. Is there someone else in your household who would like to testify?
No, but I didn't use my whole 3 minutes. I was wondering if I could have a follow-up comment.
No, we're not gonna, sorry, sir. I'm giving everybody one chance to speak for 3 minutes and then we're moving on.
Well, it was something that came up later in discussion about the developer saying they weren't going to bring in any fill dirt, and I think that's ridiculous. How are you going to fill a 12-foot drop from 32nd at Hillside, and how are you going to fill in that pond if you're not going to bring in fill dirt? And as I said, I calculated 2,000 truckloads. So I'd like that address, please.
The developer hasn't had a chance to respond. I believe you're referring to another comment from the public, so we will address that when we get to that point in the agenda.
Is there anybody who has not spoken tonight? Is there anybody else who has not spoken tonight who wishes to speak? Okay, I will now close the citizens forum. And I have a number of questions that we can talk about. So there are some questions about grading, shoring up the ditch line, how the regrading of the property is, how is erosion dealt with, maybe the applicant's engineer could talk a little bit about maybe just briefly some of the standards that the state and city require for grading and what anything you want to share with us about the grading of the property.
Okay. So yeah, I'm also the engineer. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but the site, so as I mentioned earlier, Rocky Mountain Ditch, we will be improving that southern ditch bank because it is steep and experiencing a lot of erosion in its current conditions. So as a part of the conditions of Rocky Mountain Ditch approving kind of our layout and what we're doing with our stormwater and everything, they said, hey, you have to go in there and grade back our ditch bank so that it is more stable. And once that is done, it'll be replanted and irrigated until vegetation can take hold on those ditch banks and help prevent future erosion. Internal to the site, we are limited to 25 or 4-to-1 slopes, 25% or 4-to-1 slopes that are considered stable and relatively easy to get vegetation to grow on. And that would, again, help with erosion concerns down the road. During construction, we have a stormwater management plan that we have to get approved by the city and the state to prevent dirt and erosion from entering either the Rocky Mountain Ditch or the storm sewer systems of the city. So we will have active stormwater, they call best management practices, that'll be on the site during construction to prevent erosion during construction. There will be import being brought into the site, as I believe his name was Stan mentioned. will not be 2,000 trucks. We are estimating around 10,000 cubic yards of fill, which in 20-yard trucks would be about 500 trucks. And that would happen over, a minimum of the 60-day period. Because as the dirt comes in, we have to moisture treat it and compact it in 1 foot levels. So say it's a 2-month window when all this dirt will be being imported. That's less than 10 trucks per day. And anywhere that we couldn't achieve a 25% slope in the property, we have to install a retaining wall to take up some of the grade. And those retaining walls will be designed by a structural engineer and reviewed and approved by the city before they're installed. But back to Stan's point, the property is lower than 32nd Avenue currently, and we will be bringing fill dirt in to kind of raise that level so that those houses adjacent to 32nd will be on the level of 32nd, just like they are on the south side of the street. And I think that covered most of those questions. Is that right?
Yes, I think it did.
Commissioner, can I chime in real quick? Because I spoke to a couple of folks maybe a few weeks ago about the site, and their concerns were specifically related to how much the site was going to be raised. And I basically brought up the idea of terracing where, there's each lot and then it kind of goes along with the hill. So each progressive lot will be lower. So not all of the lots are being raised up to the level of 32nd Avenue. It's just the ones kind of in that southwest corner. There is going to be a pretty significant retaining wall kind of along 32nd Avenue. There is one there currently. So the site isn't necessarily being raised. It's just there are certain portions, like the pond needs to be filled in, obviously. So I hope I didn't misspeak with that. But yeah, the site's not like getting taller or being elevated as much as it's, Hillside Drive needs to be brought up to 32nd Avenue, and then the pond obviously needs to be filled in. But a lot of it is going along with the natural topography of the site.
Right. There's kind of two control conditions in this project. If you want to think of it as 32nd Avenue and Rocky Mountain Ditch, we can't affect the grade of either of those. So we're basically tying into the level of 32nd Avenue up top. And then, as Scott mentioned, our grade kind of steps down, along Hillside Drive and from lot to lot down to the level of Rocky Mountain Ditch which will also be at its existing elevation because we can't change that. So.
And then there's a comment about 32nd and Kipling, a retaining wall. I'm not sure I understood if I'm not sure that we're proposing retaining walls at 32nd Kipling, or were they just mentioning that there will be retaining walls on 32nd and retaining walls on Kipling?
So there is an existing retaining wall that pretty much goes the entire length of our frontage on 32nd Avenue right now. That wall will actually be cut down and basically removed so that we can widen the existing sidewalk to meet the Wheat Ridge standards of 6 foot wide. And then there will be a piece of the wall that we have to replace near the intersection of 32nd Avenue and Miller Street. There's a big head wall where the Rocky Mountain Ditch, there's a culvert that goes under 32nd Avenue and it dumps out through a head wall right there. We'll basically be tying back into that head wall, but the retaining wall there will be much shorter in length than it is in the current condition, maybe 150 feet versus 600 feet that they have right now. And then on Kipling, we don't have. There's a retaining wall near the intersection of West 32nd Avenue that goes along with that 5.5 foot sidewalk. That retaining wall, it's very short, but it's needed to fit that sidewalk in there with the existing terrain that's coming off of that existing property. And that is really the only wall along Kipling Street.
Commissioner Ohm, I want to respond to that as well, because the question of the retaining wall came up in relation to the sidewalks. So just so all the public and all the commissioners are aware, there will be sidewalks along all frontages of this project. The 32nd Avenue sidewalk is being widened along the project frontage, and then along the existing house on the corner there, that 10001 West 32nd Avenue, it'll just tie into that existing sidewalk. Same goes for Kipling. There will be sidewalks along all of Kipling from 32nd Avenue all the way to the Rocky Mountain Ditch. It'll get wider and more landscaped along the project frontage, but there will also be a new sidewalk connecting that sidewalk to the ramps. So the entire project will have sidewalk coverage. And the only reason we can't require an additional property owner that's not part of the subdivision application to widen their sidewalk is because there's no development occurring on their site. If that site were to ever redevelop, they would also be required to build the full 6-foot wide sidewalk with the 6-foot amenity zone, but they're not part of this application, and that's not a logical nexus to require that for that property owner.
Thank you. And then I
think the question was looking at maybe the site distances at that intersection. I drive that intersection a lot, and I know it's kind of poor site distance there. But yeah, the wall that we've seen so far would not impact the site distance there. It wouldn't impact the safety at that intersection. And as we finalize the construction plans, we'll make sure there's no impact there to the safety of that intersection.
Thank you. And then Mr. Jeffries, I have more questions for you. Was there any kind of traffic report required for these? Is it 14 lots, the 14 homes?
No, there wasn't. And this is far under the threshold where we would do kind of a really detailed traffic impact analysis. But just with, 14 lots, it's not a big generator of traffic. It's not anticipated to really cause any problems here. The volumes on 32nd are about 10,000 cars a day. So it's, there's existing traffic sometimes at rush hour and slowdowns. I understand that, but this development really shouldn't have a noticeable impact on that.
Thank you. And then what about a de-acceleration lane? Was that ever considered a requirement?
No, it doesn't meet the requirements strictly on a volume basis. We can take a look at that as we review the final plans, but I don't think it's warranted unless there's some kind of special condition through CDOT requirements. I don't think it's going to be warranted, but we can take a look.
Okay, thank you. And then I know I went over this with staff about the property line going across the ditch. That was a comment that is allowed.
The property line does not go along across the ditch. It goes along the center line of the ditch.
The lot line, I think, is maybe what the.
Yeah, there's no lot lines that cross the ditch. So in reference to the question about the easement does is included in the lot area, just as it is for the Overlook Estates subdivision. So easements generally, there's easements on every lot in the city of Wheat Ridge, utility easements, drainage easements, those are always taken into account. You can't build on them, but they're still taken account to your lot area and the responsibility of the property owners generally to maintain.
So I guess I'm a little confused. I'm looking at the sheet and it looks like the lot lines definitely go across the 30-foot easement, which is part of the ditch. It goes to the outside property line.
The lot line goes into the center line of the ditch. It doesn't go
center
all
line of the ditch.
Right.
Okay.
Easements are always encumbered on lots, whether they're for utilities, drainage, and whatever the width is. In this case, what it results in is a bigger setback. So it means those homes will have, instead of a 15-foot minimum setback, they'll have a 30-foot setback. So we've only got a 25% build area on these lots. They wouldn't be allowed to sort of cover the whole lot anyway. So it's having no impact on how that site can develop. It's just increasing essentially the setback there.
So that goes into the next questions about views and they're talking about the home height max, which is 35 feet. So then this would be pushed back at a minimum 30 feet from that property line, correct?
Right. So the maximum height for any residential zone district in all of the city is 35 feet. That would apply here as well under the R1 zoning. You're right on that northern edge along the ditch should have a bigger setback. As Scott described too, since a lot of these lots will end up being lower than the street elevation, I think that the actual impact on views may not be quite as severe as as I think folks may be imagining, we don't have any view shed ordinances in Wheat Ridge. So that's not a consideration in terms of the siting or design of a residential project.
And to add to Lauren's point, the homes on the south side of 32nd are all built into the hillside. So they're actually significantly higher than any of the base levels for these homes would be. So there's probably, I don't want to guess, maybe 10 feet higher. And then with a 35-foot height limit, and then most of the homes being, 20, 30 feet lower than 32nd Avenue, the impacts to views, I mean, it's not going to have no impact, but it's not going to be like just a wall.
Then it talked about privacy for the south edge. I'm guessing these were properties from Overlook Estates that maybe they're inquiring if there's going to be a fence along that 30-foot easement. Was that your understanding, staff and fellow commissioners?
That would be up to the individual property owners to build a ditch along the easement.
The fence.
Yes. So there's not a fence there currently.
Okay.
Someone could build a fence if they wanted to for privacy. I assume most homeowners would want to do that. We know that there are going to be fences built along Kipling and along 32nd Avenue, but because of the ditch is an easement, I don't know. I don't know if Nathan is able to answer that or not.
Okay.
I think you're right. Most of the properties will end up putting some sort of property fence along that ditch line. But again, it is up to the individual property owner if they would want to do that or not.
I think that answered all the questions, comments. Was there anything else that I missed? No?
Mr. Chair, we have one hand raised from the public. So if you can maybe explain that we've passed the public comment.
Yeah, we've closed the citizens forum. Okay, are there any other questions for staff or the applicant or the commissioners? Commissioner Sarai?
There was a comment in the Wheat Ridge Speaks from good friend Vivian about parkland dedication. It was, I will admit, it's a little over my head, but I thought maybe Lauren would know how to best answer, or Scott, that question.
I did see that question, and it was, I believe, the premise of a parkland dedication is the more residents you add, the more impact you have on parks. And so we collect a fee in lieu of parkland when we don't get a dedication of land for parks. There are lots of public services that would probably benefit from having a fee paid every time we add a new resident to Wheat Ridge. Those are called impact fees. They're regulated by state statute, and they can be adopted by local jurisdictions. We don't have any other impact fees. So I think she specifically suggested like a public safety, and now I'm not looking at the comment, but we've talked in the past about whether there should be like a storm sewer impact fee. But the short answer is we could do that kind of a thing, but we don't do that in Wheat Ridge. We have not yet. That would be a policy discussion at city council level. I think who did we just lose off the screen? I want to make sure I'm looking at the participant window. Did we lose a commissioner? 1, 2, 3.
I can't see Commissioner Leo anymore.
Antal, Commissioner Antal. She's coming back.
There we go.
Thanks.
And then I had a question still, I guess about tract B. So that's kind of landlocked. Is that going to have like a little path or something behind lot 7 and 8? Some type of access road, or what is that? What is that?
Tract B is the existing access to that house.
Okay.
And it's going to just remain as is. It's within the subdivision ownership boundaries. That's just weirdly how the lot lines were drawn back whenever this was done, but nothing's changing there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Larson.
Thank you, Commissioner Holm. I did have one follow-up question on the contours and the hillside drive from the entrance off of 32nd to the northern, where it curves off again, what's the drop off on that? How many feet does it go from 32nd to the bottom?
I don't know the exact amount of feet, but how the road has been designed is it comes off of 32nd Avenue, and then it levels off. It was previously at a 4% slope, which is pretty standard for a certain amount of feet before it goes any steeper, but we've actually recently made that less. So it's about a 2.5% slope for about 50 to 60 feet, and then it maxes out at an 8% slope going down until it hits the low area of the street. And then as it goes around that pinch point, it actually starts to go back up to get to where the cul-de-sac is. And the speed limit on that road is going to be 20 miles an hour to try to keep it slow. And there's a lot of curvature, so hopefully that encourages, some slow movement through the neighborhood.
Well, I think the concern would be that since this is a north-facing roadway, in the wintertime, you would not get any sun melt, and maybe it would be the responsibility of the homeowners association, but I would think you'd have a problem with ice going down that grade.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a concern. It's just like that the slope coming down off of Kipling, it's also north facing. I think our road is even less steep than that hill is as you go down Kipling. And so, yeah, I mean, that people have to be careful. Hopefully the roads are maintained since it's going to be dedicated over the city. Hopefully the city will be keeping up with it during snowstorms and stuff, but there will probably be times where, people are going to want to be careful for sure.
That's right. It's a public street. It's not a private driveway.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. So all streets in Wheat Ridge, essentially south of the creek. Well, these roads are all draining because they're trying to get to Clear Creek. So all of our north-south local streets, essentially from 32nd to the creek, have a similar condition. It's not any different than what we see on all of those streets. And precisely, so when it is a public street, as we desire to have here, from a design and width standpoint, it's not, the HOA is not allowed to plow it.
But typically, the city does not plow the majority of local streets. It has priority streets, and it doesn't plow the local streets necessarily.
Right. It requires a certain amount of snowfall for us to plow local streets. So the condition on this roadway would be similar to all the other north-south, generally north-south facing streets in this area of town.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, at this time, I would entertain a motion.
I would like to move to recommend approval of case number WS-20-01, a request for approval of a major subdivision on property located at the northwest corner of West 32nd Avenue and Kipling Street and zoned residential 1, R-1, for the following reasons. 1, all requirements of the subdivision regulations, Article 4 of the Zoning and Development Code have been met. 2, all agencies can provide services to the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense, with the following conditions. Number 1, the applicant shall pay the required fees in lieu of parkland dedication at time of building permit for each individual lot. 2, the developer shall enter into a subdivision improvement agreement and a lot sale restriction covenant agreement prior to recordation of the subdivision plat. And 3, prior to issuance of building permits, the developer shall provide homeowner association covenants for review by staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? I have a couple comments. I definitely agree about the the cottonwoods being problematic. But it doesn't surprise me at all of how much water that they're sucking up, and I'm a little surprised that they waited this long to have them removed. There's a lot of other non-native species of trees, so I definitely am supportive. I can see why that would have to be done, especially for the ditch that's conveyance of water. I do have some concerns that Commissioner Larson brought up about HOAs not being able to plow, when I know that the city is rarely going to be providing services of plowing that road. So I don't know what the developer can do about that. And my last comment is, I do bike ride that 32nd Avenue, and it is a lot of fun to go down that hill, but if the drives are there, you just got to be careful and slow down. That's what's going to happen, but I'm definitely going to support the project. It looks like a good fit for the site. So are there any other comments or discussion?
I would like to make a comment.
Yeah.
I am not unaware of the controversy, as they say in England, over the last development that was tried to be built here. And I think that this developer should, I mean, it's exactly what the residents said they wanted. They wanted residential. They wanted a higher quality development. And based on what he said these homes will go for, I think it will fit in very nicely with the rest of the homes in that area. It's not a perfect lot. Nothing left in Wheat Ridge that's not developed is perfect. But I think you have addressed the issues adequately for this development and have answered our questions adequately. So I'd like to congratulate you on a nice development, and thank you for bringing quality product to our city.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you could, and I agree with everything that that you and Commissioner Disney have just said. I think, a quick question on the number 2 in the conditions, subdivision improvement agreement and a lot sale restriction covenant. What does that cover?
So the subdivision improvement agreement requires, basically, before you can get a certificate of occupancy or building permits, that the public improvements are built. So that way, if the developer, for whatever reason, walks away, the city still gets a street, and we still get sidewalks and improvements on the property. And then for the lot sale covenant restriction, that is basically an agreement that the developer and the city sign that prevents them from selling lots before the public improvements are in, because what would result otherwise is just a paper subdivision where you can speculatively sell lots to people, never build the street, and then you have lots without access or utilities. So it's just a contract to let the development actually proceed.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, call for a vote.
Raised hand is in favor, correct?
Correct.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, I will now open up the public hearing for, give me just a second here. Case number WZ-19-03, an application filed by JMS Lake Holdings LLC for approval of a rezone from Agriculture 2 to Planned Mixed-Use Development, PMUD, with approval of an outline development plan. And ask for the staff report, but before I do that, I wanted to just remind everybody that for the public hearing, we will be adding appropriate staff, and where applicable, the applicants to our video feed, their screens will be shared, or presentations are being made. They will remain a part of the video feed until the conclusion of their respective agenda items. After the presentations, the commission will ask questions of staff and the applicant, and then we will conduct the public comment portion of the hearing. This will be conducted in the same manner as earlier by unmuting all our public participants. We typically administer an oath for the participants in a public hearing, staff, applicants, and the public. In this virtual meeting format, we're administering that oath in a different way. If you comment during a public hearing tonight, by choosing to testify, you're agreeing that the testimony you give will be the truth as you know it. May I please have the staff reports?
Same as earlier, I will present my video and then I'll switch to the applicant's video. We do have an extra potential condition of approval that I will also present after both are done, just so we have that. But let me go ahead and share my screen and play the video. Hello, my name is Scott Cutler, and I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. I'm presenting case number WZ 1903, which is a request for approval of a zone change from agricultural 2 to a planned mixed-use development with an outline development plan. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and this digital presentation. The property is within the City of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met, and therefore the Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case.
Noted.
This is a 2018 aerial view of the property. The property is outlined in red. It's just under 23 acres and is currently vacant. The Ward Road Pond is a large portion of the property. It's located at the southeast corner of the I-70 Frontage Road North and Ward Road, just north of I-70 and the off-ramp to Ward Road. The surrounding area is a mix of uses, but primarily commercial and industrial in nature. The Wheat Ridge Ward commuter rail station is located just off the map to the northeast, about a half-mile walk from this site. This is a zoning map. The site is zoned agricultural 2. Most of the surrounding zoning is industrial employment or planned industrial development. The Kaiser campus to the west is zoned C1. At the top of the screen to the north is the TOD area, which is primarily zoned mixed use. Some neighborhoods further southeast are zoned R2. The topography of the site makes development challenging. The site slopes steeply from the frontage road down to the shoreline of the pond. The only flat area on the site is the area extending into the pond on the east side of the site. As I'll discuss in a minute, development in the northwest area of the site will need to conform with the existing steep topography. Some portions of the site along the frontage road are preserved in a slope easement, which was created when the road was constructed and will not allow for development in that area. The request tonight is for a rezone from A2 to planned mixed-use development, PMUD. Given the surrounding conditions, the unique topography, and the presence of a large pond, the PMUD zoning is the most appropriate zone change option. The plan development process entails several steps before development can occur. With this application, we are only at step 1. The outline development plan, ODP, accompanies the zone change request by establishing the zoning and development standards. In the future, a specific development plan, SDP, will be required for each development site as created by the ODP. A subdivision may also be required to clean up existing lot lines, create developable parcels, and to sell or develop lots separately or under different ownership. The code allows for processing ODPs and SDPs concurrently or sequentially, and the applicant has chosen the sequential 2-step option. I'll go through the ODP document and then talk about the criteria for review and staff findings. The outline development plan establishes the PMUD zoning. The ODP is 2 sheets in this case, which are in the staff report. The first page has standard signature blocks, legal descriptions, development standards, and a description of the development. The second sheet, shown here, contains the proposed site layout, which I'll show in more detail in just a minute. The site is broken into 2 planning areas. Planning Area 1 is located at the northwest of the site at the hard corner of Ward Road and the frontage road. Planning Area 2 is much larger, but contains the entire pond, most of the shoreline, and a spit of land on the east side of the property, with a development pad that extends into the pond. This is a close-up of PA1 showing the primary features. The sole public access point will be located halfway between Ward Road and Van Gordon Street on the frontage road. Only emergency access was permitted by CDOT on Ward Road. The proposed pedestrian trail location is shown along the pond shoreline in purple. The final location of this trail will be determined at time of SDP through review of engineering documents, but the ODP requires a pedestrian trail as part of its open space commitments. The proposed building envelopes are shown in brown. Due to the topography, these buildings will be built into the hillside with opportunities for parking behind or underneath the buildings. Much of the shoreline area is being preserved as open space. This is a close-up of PA2. You can see the continuation of the pedestrian trail along the north side of the pond to the access point shown at the northeast corner. The city's proposed linear park and trail will connect across the frontage road to the north, allowing a direct connection to the transit station. The access point shown here traverses Tract A of the Lakemont Center development over an access easement, and a drive aisle would head south along the narrow portion of land to the building pad in PA2. The current zoning is Agricultural 2, which is a relic of the site's past as a gravel quarry. A2 would allow single-family homes on lots of an acre or more, or agricultural uses. In today's context, it is an atypical zoning for a site with adjacency to an interstate and within a half-mile of a commuter rail station. This slide goes over the proposed development standards for the site, which are detailed on page 1 of the ODP document, including uses, architecture, building height, parking, setbacks, and landscaping requirements. The permitted uses and development standards shown here seek to balance the site's proximity to transit, access to water, visibility from the interstate, adjacency to a state highway, and the city's desire for high-quality urban design and open space. We use several criteria to evaluate zone change requests, which includes consistency with the comprehensive plan. Full analysis of the criteria for consideration of the zone change are provided in the staff report. This image is an excerpt from the comprehensive plan, which provides some guidance in terms of land use. The light purple designation denotes a mix of uses, including employment, which is denoted by the large asterisk. You can see here again the site's proximity to the train station. The comprehensive plan and more recent planning documents call for a mix of transit supportive uses in the area. Residential uses closer to the train station and on the site will essentially bookend the sub-area and support the employment uses and retail businesses in the area, creating a rich diversity of land use that is called for in the city's guiding documents. As a requirement of the zone change process, a neighborhood meeting was held on June 11th, 2019 at City Hall. One person attended the meeting in addition to the applicant team and staff, and the notes from that meeting are included in the staff report. Since Wheat Ridge is not a full-service city, we sent the application on referral to outside agencies, including fire, water, and sanitation, as well as completed an internal review. We did not receive any concerns or objections from outside agencies. Because ODPs are conceptual in nature, many of the specific utility comments and review will come at time of the SDP. Before the hearing, the property was posted for 15 days, and letters were sent to property owners within a 600-foot radius. Comments collected on the Wheat Ridge Speaks website will be reviewed by the planning commissioners and entered into the public record. Staff believes the zone change request meets the criteria. It allows for a compatible land use, it complies with the comprehensive plan and the city's vision for transit supportive uses and recreational amenities in the Northwest sub-area, and it provides opportunity for reinvestment in the area. Ultimately, staff is recommending approval of the request. Planning Commission will recommend a decision to City Council, who will also review the ODP. If City Council approves the ODP, the zone change is approved and the applicant can move forward with a specific development plan and subdivision plat. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. All right, I'm going to switch to the applicant's presentation.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Barron. I'm an architect with Think Tank Studio, and we are here representing Mr. Mark Jolstad with JMS Lake Holdings LLC, who is the owner of the property under consideration by your committee this evening. The project site you see before you in this aerial view is located at the northeast intersection of Interstate 70 and Ward Road, and also bounded on the north by the West I-70 frontage road north. This property contains one of the two ponds known as Ward Ponds. The 22.73 acre subject parcel was originally platted in Jefferson County in 1907 prior to the incorporation of the city of Wheat Ridge. Around the time of the construction of the I-70 corridor, this property was an active gravel mine to support the construction of the road grade. When the operation ceased, the natural springs and seepage from the irrigation infrastructure created the pond, which today covers approximately 51% of the property. As a result of these activities, the remaining portion of the property consists largely of steep tree-covered gravel embankments to the shoreline. A small peninsula, which housed the mining equipment, is uniquely positioned in the lake, creating an approximately 2 acre site with related site access from the frontage road. The following views depict the existing condition of the lake and surrounding property. The previous owner of this property was the city of Arvada. During their time of ownership, the property remained undeveloped. For a limited period of time, and in association with the Colorado Department of Wildlife, limited access to the shoreline for fishing was permitted. Mr. Jolstad of JMS Lake LLC, the applicant, seeing the unique potential amenity afforded by the approximately 11 acre pond, purchased the property in its existing condition in July of 2016 with the goal of rehabilitating this unmaintained and underutilized property into a key recreational and mixed-use gateway project at one of the principal entrances to the city of Wheat Ridge. The outline development plan documents under your review propose to rezone the subject parcel from its current agricultural 2 designation to the planned mixed-use development zone district required to provide the necessary flexibility for future redevelopment of this site. The proposed project scope will entail a mix of commercial, retail, and residential uses surrounding a private lake and linear open space feature for the enjoyment of the residents and patrons. The applicant is proposing 2 planning areas for consideration. Planning Area 1 on the upper portion of the site is proposed to house a multifamily residential community consisting of mid-rise multifamily apartments with complementary retail amenities configured atop structured parking integrated within the site topography. The architecture will front the West I-70 frontage road north, as well as the future Ward Station development area. The lower peninsula site in Planning Area 2 is proposed to house a retail marine dealership, a wakeboard cable park, and a feature restaurant. The design intent for this area is to take advantage of the inherent waterfront character and develop the architecture, open space, and the site amenities into a feature recreational and residential destination. Following our review of the Wheat Ridge Municipal Code, the Comprehensive Plan, the Northwest Subarea Plan, and Ward Station Vision documents, as well as our collaboration with the Wheat Ridge staff in drafting this application before you, we believe the ODP and a request for rezone is in keeping with the design intent and statutory requirements prescribed therein. Further, we believe the proposed redevelopment of this property will enhance the unique open space and recreational potential of this site to create a vibrant mixed-use community that would complement the surrounding development area as a whole and further provide the gateway focus into Wheat Ridge. To conclude our presentation, we appreciate this opportunity and welcome your feedback on this proposal. We are also happy to address any of your questions you may have regarding the project. Thank you.
That concludes my presentation and the applicant's presentations. There is an additional condition of approval, but I realize it probably makes more sense to go over that when it is time for the motion. So maybe we'll leave that for now.
I'm going to promote our applicant team so that we can have them answer some questions. Just a moment. I think I've done it correctly. Patrick, Greg, and Mark. Does that sound right?
Okay, are there any questions from the commissioners? I'll start with Commissioner Simbai.
Thank you, Commissioner Ohm. Two minor questions, I think. One is more on the historical side. The applicant mentioned that this area is owned by Arvada up until 2016. Just question, how did we in Wheat Ridge get it? How did that happen?
It was always in the city of Wheat Ridge, but they owned the property like any landowner. They, unfortunately, hindsight is 2020, they did offer the city to purchase the property. And at the time, we did not have those kinds of funds nor the vision to understand why that might have been a good city asset. So it went to the private market, and I believe it was owned by a different partnership for a period of time, and then our current applicant. So always has been in Wheat Ridge, but did have Arvada's ownership for a period.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
They thought they were gonna hold some water rights there, I think, and then that did never come to fruition. So they leased it to the State Division of Wildlife, and then it was a fishing pond for a period of time as well.
Excellent, thank you. The other question was just about the public comment or the public meeting. The first, well, there was a bullet point about the adjacent property owner in the easement to the east, and it did look like there could be some contention there. I mean, it's not, I mean, that's thinking about it in the future, but it just, I would love some discussion on that part, that bullet point.
I can start and then probably turn it over to Lauren or our city attorney on that. And that's actually related to the condition that we're recommending adding. So because there is still some unsolved issues about claims from both the applicant and the adjacent property owner, we are recommending a condition that basically states we can go on with the hearing and go ahead and either approve or deny tonight, but no building permit or grading and drainage permit may be granted until resolution of any sort of defect for access across that tract A in the northeast corner to the satisfaction of the city attorney. So that kind of covers us and allows the two private property owners to work out some sort of access amongst themselves, but with the condition that we wouldn't be able to permit any sort of construction activity on the site unless that's resolved.
There is a platted easement there, and both parties have indicated a desire to come to a mutual agreement. And sort of with all of those factors in mind and this condition, we felt more than comfortable proceeding with the zoning as long as we get all of that resolved before any actual development occurs.
Any other questions?
Good.
Commissioner Simbai?
Not at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Leo? Commissioner Kearns?
No questions.
Commissioner Peschauer?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Antal? You're muted, Commissioner Antal.
Sorry, I've had to reconnect separately on my phone. I kept losing connection. I mean, this is maybe just a general question for staff. You know, because I know this area is changing so quickly, and just thinking about, I know the property's zone A2, but, you know, looking at, there's kind of this good block of industrial and thinking about where does industrial belong in the city, but then also there's this big, there's a lot of activity for commercial and residential around the rail line, you know, and so just thinking compatibility, you know, I know it's good to have diversity, but, you know, thinking about that and thinking about the potential for some residential to happen in this area so close to the interstate. I mean, I don't know if this is a question. I guess I'm just thinking about in terms of compatibility, does this seem to make sense based on kind of what the city is trying to do in this area with the comp plan, with the light rail coming into play? I don't know if that's a firm question. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
a thought.
I think it's a good question. It's a question of sort of how does this proposed mix of uses fit into the city's vision? And I would suggest, and I think Scott describes in his staff report, that it does fit our vision. So with the proximity to the transit, we want to provide transit supportive land uses, whether that's employment or residential. We've heard from a lot of the business owners up here that they wish there were more retail uses, a brew pub or a restaurant, and that doesn't come until you get more rooftops. So while, who wants to live in an apartment by the interstate will sort of be dictated by the market, but I think what they'll also find is that they have proximity to the mountain, to the airport, to the train, to downtown, and to a pond. So it's unique in having sort of access in all of those ways. And our vision is to sort of bookend our transit station with residential uses. So we have quite a bit more on the north side of the tracks, and then probably this as maybe the last sort of big one on the south side of the tracks, bookending our transit site, and then also accommodating a variety of other potential commercial uses and uses that complement the pond. So it's a unique intersection. I mean, as you know, most of our remaining development sites are at unique transition points. This is no exception. But I do think the mix of uses sort of lends itself and somehow adapts to sort of all of those surrounding conditions and complements our vision as well.
Okay. Commissioner Antoli, do you have any other questions?
No, I think she answered it sufficiently. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Larson?
Thank you, Commissioner Ohm. I guess at this very, very, very early stage of really just ideas for what could be done with this unique property. It's highly visible from the highway. It seems to have pretty good access. Its proximity to the Ward Road station all kind of point to just the idea that something should be done with this property. The only question I have, or the questions I have, is on not so much accessibility, but use. To me, it doesn't seem like Tract 1 has sufficient space to build an up to 6-story apartment building, is what they're looking at. And access and parking to that, and then some sort of a recreational facility on Tract 2 that would involve boating, and I heard something about skiing or water skiing or something. Whether there would be sufficient parking and frankly access to that coming in off the highway. I don't know. There are a whole bunch of questions that probably not appropriate at this point, but would need to be addressed as this thing moves forward.
I can start with that. And I agree. I think a lot of the very specific site design questions will be addressed if this is approved at time of the specific development plan. So that's when you'll see the specific parking plans, grading, architecture, landscaping, all of that stuff. To address your comment about the apartment building on the planning area 1, that site is about 5 acres, so that's actually a pretty large site for an apartment building, and a lot of that likely would still be retained more as slope and landscaping area. The intent of the development, at least the way it's written on the outline development plan, is that a lot of this stuff is kind of getting built into the hillside. So working with the slopes, working with the topography, and you may have a building that's 3 stories on one side and 5 stories on the other, just so it's built more into the hillside. So kind of like the previous proposal, it is a challenging site, and you kind of have to work with the grades, not against them.
To your comment about parking, couple of things. So this is establishing just the minimum parking standards, and we, as Scott mentioned, when we get to the SDP, we would be assessing with those that they're meeting the minimum parking. There's not a lot of flat areas on the site, and the benefit of being able to build into hillside is it actually makes the parking garage a lot more practical. So we do expect that if there were to be a multi-story office or partner, then they would have some garage, parking garage component to that. So again, we've identified uses that work, I think, with the area, but also with the land that we have to work with.
Any other questions?
Thank you. No other questions.
Okay. Commissioner Disney?
I just have a general question. The pond to the east, is that the one that has the really low lights? Is there a sidewalk around it?
That's correct.
Yes.
And is that going to be developed, or is that just the person that owns it wanted to light it up? I find it kind of odd.
The owner of that property got an entitlement years ago. It's actually the same owner who developed the Lakemont Center on the north side of the frontage road. Has long had a vision of sort of a path around the lake. It complements now sort of our vision of having a more recreational facility around the lakes. And I believe, he chose to make that investment to sort of demonstrate to potential future purchasers, who I believe his properties, I think, on the market now, to sort of attract them to the site and help them understand sort of what his vision was. So we've been in touch with him, as has the applicant. That he may even be on the call today to testify.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple questions. The first one, I'd like to have Mr. Jeffries answer. So under the traffic report, it said the total is 2,362 daily trips, and then it said with morning and after, and then it stated what the morning and afternoon trips were. But what would the remaining 2011 trips, when would those occur?
Jordan, are you there? There you go. I believe they're the trips that are not the peak hour, sort of dispersed throughout all the rest of the day. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? I don't have the report in front of me.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that on the document, because I can find the exact page here. Bear with me.
Page 5.
Page 5. Okay. Yeah, page 5, it says traffic, and it says that the development has the potential to add about 2,362 daily trips, with 125 of these occurring in the morning peak and 226 in the afternoon peak. I'm a little surprised that it's saying that the very, very lowest number is 125 and 226, but it's like, okay, so what about the remainder of the 2011? When are those occurring? That's the bigger number.
So yeah, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think those are just dispersed throughout the rest of the day. So
okay.
Throughout the day.
And to chime in a little, I think part of it is just because it's a mixed use development. So it takes into account both residential trip generation, but also potential commercial trip generation. And there's different peak hours for like a commercial, and then there's different peaks for restaurants. So they actually would be dispersed for multiple hours throughout the day.
There's more discussion about that on the next page, about the total trip count and how it's broken down.
Okay. And then the next question I had is just looking at the plan sheet. Let's see, one of the larger sheets. Sound like of our report, it's page 35, I believe. Let's see, the bottom right is the sheet ODP2. So my question is we've heard some issues with potential access easements going on, and my understanding is that this is a private lake. And so my question is could a portion of the lake, let's just say the northeast corner, could that be filled in? Or is that something that's against state or city code?
The ODP addresses that a little bit actually in the landscaping and open space section. There likely would have to be some fill on the lake in order to accommodate roadways into the site. Maybe Patrick can talk to this as well. But yeah, the ODP does permit some fill. We did require though that there's like a minimum pond size so that they couldn't just dump dirt in the pond and call it a day. The ODP actually would require there to be a pond and open space on the site, but it would allow some flexibility in terms of likely there is going to need to be some fill in certain areas to get access and maybe to enlarge that planning area to development area. I'm trying to think what else. And if there was any sort of development proposal on fill that's not shown on this ODP, it would basically require another rezoning application. If they wanted to add other buildings by filling in portions of the pond, they would have to go back through this process.
Do you know just roughly, generally, what that minimum, like, what is the size of the lake right now in acreage? And
I believe it's about 12 acres. It's about 50% of the total area of the site, and that's 22. And the minimum area of the pond that we would require under this ODP is 5.
Oh, okay.
But that being said, any sort of development proposals on any of the filled areas would then result in a new rezoning application. So, you know, that takes into account some natural fill of the pond, what, you know, if there's a drought or the water table changes and it kind of dries up, or there's some portions of the pond that are filled in for roads or for access or something like that, that between 5 and 12 kind of gives the developer some flexibility.
Okay. That was all the questions I had. Did any of the commissioners have any other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay.
Hey, yeah.
Yes,
go ahead. This is Will. So I'm intrigued about the cable-towed wakeboard park. That sounds really, really cool, really fun. It sounds like a great addition to the city. But I'm wondering, how deep is the lake? Is the water safe to swim in, or, you know, potentially fall in with your mouth open and swallow some of the water? It seems like kind of a stagnant pond. Would you guys be circulating the water or aerating it, or what's the plan with the water quality if you're going to have people swimming in there?
I can answer that. This is Patrick Barron with Think Tank Studio. The lake is actually spring fed primarily. The main water source for the lake itself is the spring from underneath. And then it gets a percentage of water. We don't know what percentage, but it's a minor percentage of the water is seepage from the irrigation ditches adjacent to it. So spring-fed lakes are inherently a lot more oxygenated and clear than otherwise just mill ponds or whatnot. So I can't address the actual clarity or toxicity or anything like that, but for the most part, the water is fairly clear, also given the type of fish species that are in there. It's not exactly rainbow trout, but it's not carp either. So it tends to be more fresh, cold water or cool water fish that are in there, which require a fair amount of water clarity.
Okay. And do I see that this lake has a drainage into the next lake to the east? Is that what I'm seeing? And it looks like a rectangle sort of spillway.
Yes, that is correct. The lake elevations of both vary somewhat dramatically from year to year and season to season, but generally speaking, the water elevation of the left on Mr. Jolstad's property is of a higher elevation than the water elevation of the east pond, and this pond the overflow is into that pond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for staff or applicant?
Yeah, but one final question there, Commissioner Ohm. What happens to the 2 ditches that run through planning area 1? I mean, they're still active ditches, right?
Scott, do you want me to address that?
I can start, but yeah, so they are active ditches. We did require the developer to reach out to the ditch companies and would require some sort of response from them before development can occur. Whether they want them to be piped or rerouted is kind of up to the individual companies because they are private entities. It's nothing the city can control. They're not drainage. They're actually similar to the Rocky Mountain Ditch in that they're privately owned water. So it'd be up to them to decide what that looks like, and that would take place at time of actual development.
So that wouldn't be, Scott, that wouldn't be anything that the city would take a hand in then?
I mean, we would require them to resolve it before we would allow them to build, but the city is not going to proactively approach the ditch companies.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I will now open the hearing for public comment. If you wish to comment on this case, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Speakers may not donate their time. When I recognize you, please give us your name, spell your last name, and share your address. We'll now unmute all participants. Please keep background noise to a minimum. If you do not plan to speak at this time, you may mute yourself through your own device. Is there anybody signed up?
Yes, we have a few people. So like last time, if you're on the line, please choose the raise hand feature and I will call on you. I do see 3 phone numbers. If you're on the phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand. We'll start with David. David, you've been unmuted, or if you could unmute yourself so we could hear you. There we go.
Yeah, so you're saying David Reardon? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My name is David Reardon. I'm a resident of Denver, Colorado at 2282 Dahlia Street. I represent Colorado River Surfing Association, a nonprofit that promotes river surfing. And we just want to quickly say that we would be very supportive of the zone change in the hope that this property is developed later on for something that is open to the general public for recreational use in the water, be it wakeboarding with a cable park or any other type of activities. One of the things that we do with river surfing is that we promote river surfing, and one of the ways that you can do that is with floating wave pools, and we've added a comment about that. Good thing about that, if there is an issue with water quality, it helps out with that, helps the stratification of the water, helps aerate the water with more oxygen. But overall, we'd like to go ahead and support our wakeboarding community. We're not wakeboarders, we're surfers. We surf standing river waves, but we'd like to go ahead and support this, and hopefully we see the zone change. And if there's any questions, we would like to go ahead and answer that offline. And last thing is, we really like Tammy's snowboards hanging up behind her. That was pretty cool. That's about it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If anybody else would like to speak from the public, please go ahead and raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands right now, so we might just go to the alphabetical option. If you're on your phone and you would like to speak, when your last name is called up in the alphabet, please hit *6 to unmute yourself on the phone.
Anybody with last name with A through E? Last name A through E. Okay, last name begins with F through J. F through J. Anyone whose last name begins K through O. K through O. Is there anyone whose last name begins P through T? P through T? Is there anyone whose last name begins U through Z? U through Z? Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak?
One last reminder, if you're on the phone, please hit *6 to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
Please speak now before I close the citizens forum. So no one?
I don't see anybody unmuted.
Okay. Okay, I will now close the citizens forum. There's just a comment, no questions. I don't know if you want to have, if the applicant or staff want to discuss the supportive comment. Otherwise, we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to ask about the additional condition. Scott, you said you might help us out with that.
Or I'll actually share my screen just so you can see it. And this would be in addition to the, can you all see the Word document that I have up?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that would just be in addition to, I forget if there are any other conditions on this approval or not, but it would be the condition on the approval as recommended by our city attorney. And that's just that any access issues would be resolved between the two parties to the satisfaction of our city attorney prior to building permits or grading permits.
We don't have any conditions included in the suggested motion, so if the commission would be inclined to add this, you'll simply add after the sixth reason with the following condition, number 1, and then the text that you see on the screen.
Okay.
Scott's going to type that in for us.
Is there a motion?
I had a question, Lauren. Oh, okay. So this is for the following reasons, and then if we wanted to, we would add that as a condition.
Yep. So Scott, if you can add just the script would then say sort of ... with the following conditions. And this is what would be augmented onto the the end of the suggested motion on page 10.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of case number WZ-19-03, a request for approval of a zone change from agricultural 2 to planned mixed-use development with an outline development plan, ODP, for property located at the southeast corner of I-70 Frontage Road and Ward Road for the following reasons. And Scott, I'm going to list yours last, but number 1, the proposed zone change will promote the public health, safety, or welfare of the community and does not result in an adverse effect on the surrounding area. 2, the proposed zone change is consistent with the goals and objectives of the city's comprehensive plan and its vision for transit supportive uses in the Northwest subarea. Number 3, the proposed zoning and land use are consistent with the intent of a planned development, compatible with surrounding land uses, and will result in a high quality development. Number 4, the infrastructure in the area can support the development. Number 5, the proposed zoning balances the site's proximity to transit, access to water, visibility from the interstate, and adjacency to a state highway. Number 6, the criteria used to evaluate a zone change support the request. And number 7, no building, with the following condition, no building permit or grading and drainage permit may be granted until a resolution of the claimed defect in access across Tract A is resolved to the satisfaction of the city attorney.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? I did have one question. Was the person, the company, that Colorado River Surfing, did they have like a conversation with the the applicant, or is this something just kind of random that they saw this was a unique site?
I got to meet David last week, I think, and he was interested in sort of our vision of recreational uses and just the status of the two ponds. So we got to meet him, our economic development manager and myself. And then I'm not sure if he's been in touch with either of the private property owners, but there's not a lot of water in Colorado, so he was seeking it out.
And no, we have not met the gentleman. We just saw his comment on the planning department comments that came through prior to the hearing.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I will call for a vote. This is for in favor.
Okay, I know you can't see me. Hopefully you can hear me, but motion carries 8-0.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing how that develops. Is there any old business?
I don't know if it's old business yet, but I think I've shared that we have launched the Let's Talk program. So those of you who are in East Wheat or Bel Air, if you're not sure if you live in those neighborhoods, the maps are up on whatsupwheatridge.com. And we have a survey open. It takes 5 minutes or less. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We've got yard signs, so you can make sure to catch your neighbor's attention so that they can share their thoughts. We want to know what you need, what you love about your neighborhoods. We're only in these two neighborhoods for about 2.5, 3 months. So now's the time to share your thoughts. whatsupwheatridge.com, and then you'll find the Let's Talk program sites there.
You know, so I did go and fill it out, but I was a little, I guess, surprised that you have to register first before you can actually do the survey. It's not like a typical, say fill out a postcard and mail it back or do a quick.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if Jeff hasn't done it yet, we're putting FAQs up, and that's one of them. So the What's Up Wheat Ridge page is something that we'll use for a long time for a lot of different projects. And registering takes about a minute or two. I have to register on my site for the city I live in as well. And what that does is it gives us better sort of protection of your information. And what we've heard a lot of times from other projects is that folks want to know that it's not Denver residents who are making comments. It's not, somebody in Timbuktu. So while it does take an extra minute that first time to register, that means that we can stay in touch with you and keep you on our mailing list to make sure you know the status of projects. And it also helps you know that we're hearing just from your neighbors, not from other folks in the metro area.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, can I ask about the survey, since I'm not in one of the areas that is being surveyed? Sort of what's the intent? Is this a sort of, how do you like Wheat Ridge, or do you feel safe? Do you approve of what the police are doing? What specifically are you looking to gauge?
So we're calling it a Prime the Pump survey. If we're not in your neighborhood now, we will be soon. We're getting to every neighborhood in the city in a period of about 1.5 or 2 years. And the Prime the Pump survey is 10 questions that sort of covers all bases. So we've got a blank slate here, and the feedback that we've gotten so far, that we've seen from respondents is covering everything from sidewalks to bike lanes to policing to code enforcement to homelessness, sort of every topic that's on folks' minds. And this is that's the purpose of the program, to really sort of put it all out there, understand what are some common themes across neighborhoods, what are different. Bel Air and East Wheat Ridge touch each other by adjacency of Wadsworth, and we're already seeing some differences in the respondents. So can be about anything. Doesn't have to be just about planning and zoning. It's really meant to be sort of a catch-all conversation.
What's the response been like? Have you had a lot of people yet?
Not tons of people. Every time we post something on Nextdoor, which I think happens at least once or twice a week, we see a little surge. I don't know the total counts. Jeff would probably know it off the top of his head. But it's never enough until we've heard from folks, and we don't want somebody to say they didn't know. So please share. You all will hear me talking about this program for 2 years, but we're only in each neighborhood for about 3 months. So now is the time. It's a pretty easy lift to share for 5 minutes. We'd appreciate everyone's thoughts, talking to commissioners and our general viewing audience.
And Lauren, in the past, there was a fairly extensive citywide survey that Wheat Ridge conducted. Are those still going?
That's a great question. Yeah, good memory. So every 2 years, we did what was called the resident survey, and it was administered by another company who sort of specializes in doing statistically significant surveying. It was significantly longer than 5 minutes. It was, I want to say, dozens of questions. Some of our questions sound kind of like that one, but the resident survey that happens every other year didn't happen in 2020. It was supposed to happen in 2020, largely because of COVID. It was supposed to happen in March. I think it's in the budget for next year. We like to do that with the same set of questions every 2 years so we can track trends over time. The difference with ours being we're looking sort of at a single specific neighborhood. We too will probably keep the questions the same so we can look at differences across neighborhoods, but quite a bit shorter, this one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no more old business from me. New business is that we do plan to have, we don't plan to have the October 15th meeting. We do plan to have one of the November meetings, and we will know which one here in a week or so. We'll email you so that you can plan accordingly.
And just looking all the way out, does Planning Commission meet in December?
We do have 2 dates in December as potential. We have not yet figured out if we'll need those. I think we will probably need at least one of them based on what we've got in the pipeline.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. Sure. I think that's everything from me. Scott, can you think of anything else? You're shaking. You can shake. No. Okay.
Anything else, guys? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
Call for vote.
Motion passed 8-0.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.